Hi everyone, welcome to our Leadership Wellbeing webinar and panel. So this evening it was supposed to be Krissi Carter, but she is away with an emergency tonight. So I will be your host. Next slide, please. So if you want to connect with us tonight, please use @StepUpNet _ed. And then that's for Twitter or X, as some may call it. And then for Blue Sky, you've got that @handle there, which is stepupnetwork.bsky.social. And then hashtags we're using tonight is #leadership wellbeing and #stepupshares. Next slide. So who we are as an organisation. So for some of you, this might be your first event and not know. So we are a grassroots network, and we turned into a community interest company. We are a social enterprise that works with new and aspiring leaders in education wanting to take that step up and kind of thrive. So with that comes our mission and values, and we want to empower our diverse community with empathy, passion and integrity to make the step up that they wish to make. And then for our vision, it is that educational leadership, it is diverse, inclusive and flexible. It does respond to the needs of the sector by disrupting leadership, especially in terms of recruitment and development, a strong talent pipeline, and also addressing those gaps in knowledge and skills for those stepping up to that leadership role and position. Next slide. So when we think about step up, we have our golden circle, and so we've kind of gone through the what and the how, but looking at the why now. So it can be, as we know, leadership can be a lonely place. It can be quite scary and unsupported, and often, you know, we are undertrained sometimes, and it's not diverse enough, and it does have a negative impact on well-being. And there are lots and lots of people who may not have that opportunity to step up because of the lack of balance or step down. And it doesn't have to be this way, and it shouldn't ultimately, and that's why we're here. Next slide. So our how do we achieve this? So we network. We're networking tonight. We're connecting. We support other colleagues in the sector, and we collaborate with partners in the sector. And then we share the good work that we know is going on, and we share the success stories that we have created. So we're a leadership network for new and inspiring leaders, as I've said, and we focus on sharing that content and storytelling based around the 5 key themes. And our 5 key themes are leadership barriers, leadership development, leadership diversity, leadership journeys, and leadership wellbeing. Thank you. So who have we worked with? So these are some of the fantastic partners that we have collaborated. We've got Male Childcare on there. We've got Teach First. We've got Bandless Learning. We've got the Pastoral Network. So lots of really good links with kind of high quality people there. Thank you. So looking at our impact so far, so as you can see on the screen there, we have had quite the reach across the board, and I think it really speaks volumes when we hold that 100% satisfaction rate, and I hope tonight that you feel the same way and you take lots away from following leaders that are going to speak to you tonight. So some of our awards that we like to champion. So we were in the top 100 for the social enterprise with NatWest. As you can see there, we were up for the Leadership Excellence Award for organisations, and we were shortlisted. We've also got one there for community, corporate and culture, and being a charity of the year. And then we were a winner, and I'm really sorry, my eyesight's really bad, for another award on there. Perfect. So as I've said, please tweet us or X us, whatever, and then please share us on Blue Sky, and it is #StepUpShares tonight. Perfect. Okay. So I will just give it a couple of seconds. So tonight's schedule, we have our introduction, then we have a panel discussion, and then we have a close. So the timings are there on the side. In terms of our panelists, we have Andrew Cowley, Catherine Hulme, and Bukky Yusuf. So first up, we have Andrew Cowley, who is a wellbeing and education writer and speaker. He's also an author and co-founder of the Healthy Toolkit. We've got Catherine Hulme. She's the director of leadership, edge coaching, and consultant, and she's a former secondary senior leader. And then we have Bukky Yusuf, who is also a former senior leader, science teacher, consultant and coach, and network leader for Women Ed Tech. So to get us started, I think the first question and the most important is, what does wellbeing in leadership mean to you? So if I could start with Catherine.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for the question. And I think the first thing to say about that is that it is really personal, isn't it? And we know schools where they come along with very sort of universal approaches to well-being and say, right, you all need to leave at a certain time or do things a certain way. And actually that question, Brooke, is really powerful. What does it mean to you? And I think as leaders, we need to be asking that much, much more, so that individuals are empowered to really think about themselves and what being well means to them, because we all have different values, we all have different drivers and so on. So for me, it is about feeling well, being well, not doing certain things. So having that sense of control and agency in life. We can't have that all the time. Of course, there are things where we're taken, demands hit us and we have to follow those because we have responsibilities. But overall, at the end of a week, say, to be able to say, okay, now I feel like I've got a sense of agency, I've got a sense of control back. That for me is what being well means.
Yeah, fantastic. And then if I could go to Bukky, please.
Hi, Brooke. Thanks. Before I share, can I say I'm currently a senior leader, not a former senior leader, so still in teaching as I was today. So, just to follow on from what Catherine said, I think it is very personal. I'm just thinking about it from a global perspective. I've actually looked it up. Obviously, we talk about the physical, mental, emotional health, in terms, our health. But I think if we look at it more broadly, it's about feeling valued, like having a sense of purpose, and also feeling supported in one's needs. But now I thought about, what about psychological well-being as well? Because I think there are so many different facets to well-being. And not only is it about, the subjective feeling, the subjective fact of feeling happy in what we're actually doing, but I think it's finding happiness in what we do because it's got meaning and purpose. So that's a bit of a big global definition, but I think well-being has got so many different facets to it. So I just wanted to start off by sharing that.
Yeah, fantastic. And then if we go over to Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Brooke. And I'll just really echo very much what Bukky and Catherine have both said. Your well-being is sometimes is viewed as very abstract, but actually I very much promote the fact it's very concrete. Because it impacts us day in, day out, and we should include in that good well-being as well as times when our well-being is under stress. Bukky's mentioned psychological well-being, but we can have physical, social, emotional, even financial well-being as well. But I think a key thing in terms of leadership, big fan of Simon Sinek and his book, Leaders Eat Last, which you can see the way of thinking about that, but leaders need to eat with. in many ways. Leaders are entitled to well-being. They're not entitled to any more or any less than anyone else. But I think the most important thing that leaders need to really express is what their boundaries are. I'm not a fan of the term non-negotiables. There's a difference between a boundary, what I'm going to do, what I'm not going to do, at what point that boundary is crossed. It could be how you're spoken to. It could be how you're spoken about. It could be what is expected of you. And I think it's very clear that you, as a leader, set out those boundaries very clearly. That's boundaries for yourself. And this is a model that I think, if it's done empathetically, can also ripple out to your staff as well, so they can express what their boundaries are. There's no getting away from the fact that teaching education is difficult, but having boundaries that we're not going to see crossed sets in stone where you'd like to go.
Perfect. And I think that leads nicely into the next question. And I guess it's, what do you think prevents teachers from considering and really engaging with their well-being? So if we go to Bukky first.
I had a feeling you might come to me first, Brooke. I think there's two aspects to that. So first, it's about what they can actually control. And I think you can start off with at the starting academic year with the best will in the world, and it feels as though you're spinning so many different plates and it's overwhelm. I think sometimes it's a difficulty about making a priority about what needs to be done and actually carving out time and space consistently for your well-being. So I'll start off by sharing that. But I think the other side of the coin is the environment which you actually work in as well, whether or not it facilitates that. So, for example, it's in terms of maybe like workload, the ever, like continual conversation about workload. Are the school systems adding or trying to diminish the workload? For example, when you have data drops, reports, are you being asked to do things in triplicate? So I think that there are things that teachers have control over that they need to be mindful of and be consistent with regarding. But I think it also fits into the culture of the organization and whether or not they put things in place that facilitate their well-being or not. Having worked in a situation like that, with the best will in the world, it didn't matter what I was trying to do. It was difficult to do. So I think we need to be realistic in actually outlining that as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And then Andrew, if I could come back to you, please.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues that teachers have, and it goes back to initial teacher training, and I often raise this in similar discussions as well, is we don't do enough about wellbeing and mental health, if anything, in initial teacher training. Not least our own, as much as our colleagues and pupils. I've presented on a couple of occasions to PGC students about what wellbeing is and looking after themselves, also emphasising that they're part of a team. But one session is a start, but it's really about embedding it into your own personal culture, as well as into the culture of the schools. I think another issue is with our MPQs, our National Professional Qualifications, there is nothing about leading with love, leading with empathy in there. And almost the model of leadership that we have, and the model that many of our young teachers are seeing, are leaders that are driven purely by data, working in schools that are becoming examination factories rather than those who are creating and shaping the young people of the future. We have high stakes accountability, which is impacting upon well-being. It's results, and other things go to one side. And this is something I particularly noticed when I've been coaching schools on the mental health award. Schools say that they feel that mental health and well-being has dropped off the agenda for staff. They don't feel they're getting it right. They're doing the tokens, like the cake in the staff room, which isn't well-being. It's a nice thing to do, it's not well-being. So that's the kind of thing we need to think about. We need to think about embedding knowledge about what well-being and mental health is in our training, first of all, before our young teachers and our leaders get into those roles.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I agree with that, with what you've just said. Catherine, could I come over to you then for that one?
Sure. Yeah. And I absolutely concur with what Andrew and Bukky have said. And I think that there is hopefully a cultural shift. Webinars like tonight, conversations like this, hopefully bring it into the foreground of leaders thinking and discussions as part of their team and part of their school priorities. We know the retention figures, don't we? And we also know the poor recruitment figures. And there is some telling evidence about the not requirements, but the demands perhaps of a younger generation coming into the sector and really insisting, talking about boundaries, Andrew, really insisting that their personal well-being is taken seriously. And if it isn't taken seriously by the employer, then they won't stay, because it is actually a non-negotiable for them, which is really healthy for the individuals. But how does the sector cope with that? Because the sector and the system hasn't been built with those values really at the centre. It has been, as Andrew's referred to there, about the results first. And what we're needing to shift now is towards a people first culture, which, you know, is starting to happen from certainly the schools that I work with. But the main barriers that teachers will find, I think, are echoing what we've heard already, the judgment culture that we often find ourselves in, coming, you know, systemically from government, through Ofsted, through book scrutinies, through learning walks, you know. And I myself was assistant head teacher, so I was for teaching and learning, so I was dropping into people's classrooms, and this was back in the 2000s. But it was very much focused on find where people are going wrong and then tell them how to do it right. So you're always feeling like you're in a deficit model, like you're going to be caught out and you're going to be corrected. So in terms of morale and self-esteem and confidence and psychological safety, all those things that we know are needed for well-being, if the culture is wrong, as Bukky said, if the culture is wrong, there's very little you can do to really create a sense of well-being for yourself. I like to look at the sector at large and think, okay, there are schools where that becomes very, very difficult. And I myself experienced that in my first school that I worked in. And I nearly gave up my career as a teacher because of that. And it was only when I looked at other schools that I thought, oh, there are different ways of being a teacher. There are different ways of enjoying this role. And of course, it's always got its challenges and its demands and its pressures. But with the right people around you and the right teams, then you have that psychological safety to talk about your boundaries, to talk about your reality, and to feel valued and heard. So the barriers that I've noticed teachers facing in order to establish their well-being is often quite environmental, because if they are encouraged to talk about their well-being and supported to think about it, most people can recognize what their needs are. And then it's a matter of, as you were saying, Bukky, as well, carving out that time, which is a separate challenge, which one I'm sure we'll discuss more of this evening.
Yeah. So thinking about that, thinking about your values now, and how does well-being and leading on that align? So how do your values sit with your well-being and leading on that, you know, promoting staff well-being, I guess? So if we can go to Andrew first, please.
Yeah, I believe very much you need to live your values. I'm not a fan of these schools that put the values up in their display area, and nobody can remember them, nobody can repeat them. But the values that you live comes about in what people think about you. If people think you're empathetic, you have a value of empathy. If people think that you listen, you have a value of respect. If people think you're someone who will take time to solve their problem, you've got a value of perseverance, consideration. So it's very easy to say, oh, my values are blah, 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 blah. but it's what you live, it's what you do that actually shows your values as a human being, as a leader. Because let's not forget, when we're talking about well-being in schools, well-being is a societal issue. And then whatever goes on in the police, National Health Service, the armed forces, in day-to-day life out in the communities, it's all about well-being. Those things need to come out in the way people interact with each other in normal life as well as in their workplaces.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. And then if we go back to Catherine then on that one, please.
Yeah, as Andrew was saying, values can be a concept that's sort of detached from the day-to-day, but they really shouldn't be, because they are the heart of you feeling well. If you've got, it's a theory called cognitive dissonance, which means that the actions you're taking don't actually align with what you believe to be right, and that causes stress. So the more you can be aware of what your values are and what your beliefs are, the more you're able to shape your actions to align with those, the happier and ultimately healthier you'll be, because you're under less stress. So knowing your values, self-awareness of what your values are, is really a first step to well-being. And it also helps with your decision making day to day, with difficult conversations, with stressful situations, because you're able to prioritize in different ways. And so my values myself, respect is one, responsibility is one, but also recreation is one. And thinking about those, when they come up against each other. So if I've got a decision to make which is asking me to follow my responsibilities, but it's up against a recreation, should I do this thing that I feel really responsible for, or should I do this, go out and do the other thing that I want to do, and they're both really important to me. That's when we have to sort of stress test our values. But we can have a conversation with ourselves which doesn't feel confused. We can have make those decisions a bit calmer and clearer. So for me, values are key, both as an individual and then, of course, as a leader, communicating those with your team and co-creating them as an organization, hopefully then ripples out so that more and more people bring that language into those discussions, and they can stress test it with each other and have that honest conversation, so people understand and respect why people have made the decisions. If it ends up being, they've made a decision about this which wouldn't have been the way I would have gone, but I understand why they've done it. And so it breeds that understanding and sense of respect for one another's decisions.
Thank you. So then if I come back to Bukky, please, on that one.
Yeah, no, just to add to what Catherine and Andrew have already shared, I think first and foremost, in order to undertake, say, well-being effectively as a leader, not only do you need to be clear about your own personal values in the first instance, you also need to ensure that those personal values align with the organization you're going to be leading in. I think that's really clear, because otherwise, and it sounds daft, and it's only when I started a leadership role and I took a break from it that I attended a workshop by Amanda Pierce-Burton. She said about the fact that our values are our guiding principles and all the rest of it, but sometimes the feelings we can actually have, for example, like I'm bored, or I don't feel like I can compromise my ethics, or I feel trapped, they are actually showing that there isn't alignment between your personal values and the values of an organization. So I think that in order to ensure that our values as a leader align, as I say, to the organization, but also build well-being practices, I'll just share some of mine and some of the things that you can actually do. So self-awareness and self-care as a leader is really key. Now, for me, that in a way links to my integrity, so that you can articulate healthy boundaries. You can actually look at, the ways in which you undertake emotional regulation, and how you manage your behaviors and things like that. Compassionate leadership, for example, empathy. And that links to my value of relationships, where we actually check in with our teams and we spend time to listen, and we consider how the work, and, the pressures of life actually impact upon others. And that's just to name but a few. So I think that unless we're really clear on ourselves and our values, there is a dissonance, Catherine, you mentioned about that, in our actions, and our actions should actually reinforce about ourselves as leaders and also about the priorities with regards to leadership that we are implementing as well.
Yeah, lovely, amazing. So that kind of brings me on to if you have any examples of schools where they've created and sustained that culture of well-being, and you think, yes, they've got it right. So if we go to Catherine first for this one.
Yeah, I mean, it says on my name there that I'm from Leadership Edge Coaching, and our mission is to create cultures in schools where a coaching approach is threaded in to day-to-day conversations. And when we say a coaching approach, we're not talking about instructional coaching and moving somebody forward necessarily in a professional way. We're talking about their personal development, the ability to listen to one another, to hold space for one another, and to empower one another to make decisions according to individuals' values. So it's very much about well-being. And funnily enough, I was at a well-being conference recently, on the stand, trying to engage people in chat. And someone said to me, "Oh, we don't need any well-being stuff at our school because we've got it sorted." And I was like, "Oh, great. Which school are you from?" And it was wonderful to hear it's from one of the schools that we've been working with for a few years. So I was like, yeah, you have. Because actually, and that was Titherington School in Macclesfield, which is actually where Manny Botsway, the school president, is head teacher. And he approached us a few years ago to bring this coaching approach into his school because he knew the power of putting people first. And that's one of his huge mottos, is putting people first. So he has empowered members of his leadership team and middle leadership team to develop the skills to hold the space for each other. And as a result, people know that they can go and talk and share, but also have that sense of agency that I mentioned at the start, know when to park situations that are outside of their control, and so they're wasting energy on worrying about it, and where there is influence that they can bring and questions that they can ask of one another and have that safety to do so.
Yeah, lovely. And then if we could go over to yourself, Andrew.
Yeah, I've encountered lots of examples of schools that do things really well in both my writing and my coaching to go on the mental health award. And actually, again, to echo what Catherine was saying, I did a verification call the other day with a school. Did extremely well, and they were a school only established in 2018. And the head teacher had a vision that wellbeing was to be embedded, very much in terms of flexible coaching, flexible working. But the coaching culture, again, came up through very strongly in our final conversations, just what Catherine was saying. But it's not necessarily schools that win the awards that are doing things well. The schools that probably don't shout about themselves often enough, but the ones that are doing it best have got a really sound knowledge of the relationships within the school, how those relationships work. Because you can't insist on absolutely perfect relationships, everyone getting on with each other. But you do need people who work professionally and support each other, and having a knowledge of how those work, not having to deal with disputes between members of staff. Because I do see on some social media channels that there's fallouts almost physical between members of staff, and that's not good for their well-being, their colleagues' well-being, because it's a distraction from the bigger issue. If you've got a knowledge of the way the relationships work, who is the centre of the social attention, who's a bit more isolated, but who works well, and how you make sure you're supporting each other, I think is at the crux of a school that does things really well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And then coming over to yourself, Bukky.
I'll be cheeky and mention my school, and it links to what Andrew just said about the fact that you've got staff who support each other, looking out for each other. I work in a special school, so that's part of the reason why it's a very small and unique setup. But that is directly from the top about the head teacher, making sure that in order to do well, best for the young people, staff need to be taken care of in the world. So, that's an ongoing thing. But taking my school outside of that, I wanted to cite Chiltern Academy. Now, I don't know whether they've won an award or not. And so I lead to what you say, Andrew, about the fact you don't have to necessarily win an award to be recognised in this regard. What I loved are a number of different things. One, they've got a staff wellbeing team. We've got about 9-10 colleagues. So that says to me, actually, this is a key priority. It's not just one person who can do it, whether or not they've got the time to do it or not. They've actually got a team. And I wanted to share some of the wellbeing highlights. I did print it off. That's how much of a nerd I actually am. They actually take deliberate actions to lighten the workload of all staff within the academy. That says to me, they're taking it seriously. They have weekly wellbeing champion staff appreciation and tell me thank you cards from pupil, extensive CPT opportunities from a subject as well as personalized training opportunities, open doors praising good practice, sharing planning and resources, and the list goes on. That to me says this is a school that takes it really seriously. 1, 2, they're being very strategic. 3, this is part of a long-term plan, not just some of these, how can I put it politely, tick box exercises that may highlight on social media about well-being, but doesn't really work for all staff and their different considerations. So it's difficult, but that's a great example.
Lovely, brilliant. That was a great example. And just thinking about that culture of well-being, what do you think prevents staff from really engaging with their well-being? So if I come over to Bukky first, if that's okay.
Yeah, so I touched upon it before, but I think also as well, it's psychological safety about whether or not the organization and the leaders really value me and will take my considerations of well-being, will take what I want or what I define as well-being into consideration. So for example, I may need to leave early to, to pick up children or because I've got caring responsibilities, whatever it is. And that's fine. It's not seen as a black mark because you're not leaving at 5 o'clock when everyone else should, and then continue to work. But the flexibility aspect as well. So I just think from the first and foremost, you need to trust that things are put in place for your well-being. But having said that, I'm just reminded about an analogy that Diana Asagi shared at a recent Leadership Matters event about the fact that it's the responsibility of the organization to put systems and things in place that facilitate the well-being for staff, but equally it's our responsibility to take care of our well-being. So I just think that it is not being a martyr to the cause and really safeguarding the time. Whatever it is we will need to be well from a physical, mental, emotional perspective, safeguard that. And if you're like me, where I forget, I have accountability partners. So they will check in with me to say, Bukky, you said at this particular time on this particular, you can do that. Did you do it? It's a gentle nudge, but it makes me accountable to someone. So I'm more likely to do it. So that's an example.
Fantastic. And if I come over to Andrew then.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that stops teachers engaging in the process of well-being is fear. And in schools which have got an element of toxicity, and we've not mentioned that so far, but sometimes I think we do need to acknowledge there are toxic workplaces out there. And it can come from leadership, which is, as I hinted at earlier, is about exams and not much anything else. But it can also come from poor relationships, which can come in terms of tale-telling. I encountered somebody a couple of years ago said their worst wellbeing episode they had was when what they'd said in the staff room at lunchtime was repeated to the head teacher within a few minutes and was totally and utterly misrepresented and misinterpreted. And this was somebody who was actually having an emotional breakdown. And instead of being supported, they had a rocket up the backside for it. And I think fear of getting things wrong, as Catherine was saying before, being caught out, not using the right colour in your marking, and really petty examples. For example, not having your staples in straight and having them at an angle on a display, pathetic. And the worst one, which has actually happened, I've seen senior leaders going around with a ruler and measuring the border on your display. Oh, this one was 4 millimeters and that one was 5. I mean, what on earth? Have you not got better things to do as a leader than to do that? And I've actually seen it written in a report about a school. And that is shocking, a shocking waste of time and a waste of resources, because all you're doing is creating anxiety for people amongst things like that. Let's get the important things right, like teaching and learning. And if we do make mistakes, a mistake is a learning opportunity, just as it is for the children, is for our teachers as well.
Yeah, and I can clearly, I've been through that experience of fear from leadership, so I can completely echo where you're coming from with that one. So if we can move over to Catherine then, please, on that one.
Yeah, and I think what I was hearing there between Bukky and Andrew is there's perhaps two main causes. One is love of the job, and one is fear from leadership and getting it wrong. And anyone who's in education for any length of time has a love for it. You've got to, right? Otherwise you won't sustain. And what Bukky said there about not being a martyr to the cause is really difficult, because you're seeing those children day in, day out. And you're seeing your staff, if you're a leader, day in, day out, and you feel that huge sense of responsibility, particularly as when you're new to leadership as well. I mean, you'll feel that sense of responsibility forever, but when you're new to leadership, that can be a really heavy weight to feel like you're carrying, and you're also quite exposed because you are now leading, and so you should be setting an example, and there can be all these pressures that you're feeling, and you want to do a really good job, because ultimately you're looking at the future of young people, and it's a vocation, therefore the discretionary effort that you can put in to really make a difference is often a key value and a key driver for people. If I may just share a very personal story, when I was quite young in my career as a teacher, I loved the planning side of it. I loved thinking about the different students I had and how I could adapt the lesson plan and do the clip art and make it fun and research all the facts. And I loved it. It was a little project for me. But I was newly married, and it took my husband to take me away for the weekend. He dragged me away and he said, I get that you love your job, but if you also want a marriage, you're going to have to find a way to balance that. And I think we can really allow our relationships and our personal well-being to suffer because we care so deeply. Yeah. And I think finding a way to acknowledge that we care, but one of the key points of being effective in that caring is by caring for ourselves as well, and hold that value. Someone said it earlier, it applies just as much to ourselves as it does to those around us. So in terms of the love that we feel for the job, I do think that can be a real barrier in setting boundaries. The other one that Andrew's alluded to, of course, is the fear, the judgment. And also I think we don't often have good role models. And if we're going to strive to achieve something, having a role model, we're all teachers here, aren't we? We know that we need to know what a good one looks like to know what we're aiming for. And if there were more role models in leadership that could show us them, then we know what we're aiming for. And we're almost being given permission to say no to things. And that sense of balance, often we don't like to say no because of the love that we feel. But, when we say yes to things, we are saying no to something, and often it's ourselves. So just thinking around those terms of creating a balance of our own importance alongside the importance of the work that we're doing and the mission that we're on.
Fantastic, lovely. And I think I always remember something that was said to me by a leader, and that is, if you don't look after yourself, how can you look after the young people that we care for? So thinking about that then, what tips would you give to encourage staff and teaching staff to seriously engage with their well-being. So if I come over to Andrew first, if that's okay.
Well, I talked a lot about relationships, and the key thing is about the relationship you have with yourself and how much you know yourself. And knowing what you like, knowing what you value, and making sure you can do that. I've got to admit that in the late stage of my teacher career, which was during COVID, I didn't have time to take a look at things I did, because I was obviously in school most of the time. When that great myth that teachers weren't in schools, I'm afraid we were. But it's important to take time for yourself, those important things, family, for example, things that you enjoy. I mean, I'm a particular avid reader, avid gardener, organic gardener, if anyone wants any tips. Time with family, time with my granddaughter, those things are really incredibly important, and making time for that is absolutely essential. Travel as well is something else that's also important to me, and it sort of, again, reminds me of another negative thing, not regarding my well-being, but I had a colleague who every holiday went on holiday. Oh, what a great crime. And there was criticism of, oh, you're on holiday during holiday times. There's no issue with the teaching, no issue with planning. And then she got fed up with it, and she said, the reason I go on holiday, every holiday, is my dad died when I was 12. He died of cancer, and he left a fund for us, 3 children, and their mum, his wife, and said, you are to go on holiday every holiday and make the absolute best of it from what I've left for you. And I tell you, that left people stunned that she said that. She seemed very, so she was a young teacher, very mild mannered, and she just got fed up with it. And I just went up to her and said, just fantastic that you said that. That really put people in their place, so that she knew what was important to her, and she kept that family value going. And it's essential that you really do have that value for yourself.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. So coming over to Bukky then, please.
God, I'm just getting over what you just shared there, Angie. So just go pink. So tips. Oh my goodness. I feel a little bit reticent about sharing tips because it's so personalized about the different contexts, but I'll just share 3 general ones that I think anyone can apply irrespective of their context. So think about ways in which you could actually work smarter. So, for example, maybe in terms of lesson planning, reporting, we haven't mentioned AI. It has a place, not always, but, think about what's out there, because done is better than perfect. So if you've got systems of ways of sharing things and things like that, that would be good, or co-planning, what have you. That's number 1. Secondly, develop a good sleep hygiene or good sleeping patterns, because even if you're not able to regularly, take that time out for your well-being, sleeping well makes such a significant difference. It really does have a positive impact on your well-being. And then thirdly, regularly do something that you love. I mentioned before about the fact that accountability. So I'm part of different networks and groups and things like that, where we come together to do things. And that is calendared and as important as any other thing that I do in my work as well. So 3 quick suggestions that I hope others will find useful.
Fab. And then with the last few minutes, Catherine, if we could come over to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously echo what Andrew and Bukky have just said. And I think I would like to just return to what we mentioned at the start of this, which is the pressures of time. And I do believe that most people, if they had the time or gave themselves the time to think about what do I want my work life or my whole life balance to look like, and I completely agree with Andrew, you need to find things that are of high value to you in order to balance against the high value of the job that you care so much about. So, if you don't care about the other thing, then your work's just gonna take precedence all the time. So finding things that you value, but giving yourself time, because sometimes we can't plan in advance. Like, gosh, if I booked a gym class for 7 p.m. next Wednesday, and I think, yeah, that's great for my well-being, but it came to 6 p.m. on Wednesday, and I thought, that isn't what I want to do, well, then maybe it is, maybe that is the right thing, maybe that isn't the right thing, but I'm putting myself under more pressure almost. And I think just being really self-aware, so taking time, carving out time, whether that be 10 minutes, as part of your bedtime routine, or getting up 10 minutes earlier in the morning, to just be present with yourself. And it sounds a bit airy-fairy, but really just listen to what you need on that occasion. And try not to beat yourself up by, oh, I haven't done this, and I said I would do that, and, I should be doing this for the kids, or I should be doing this for my physical health. And it is what it is, right? And you can make some changes on a daily basis, but we know what life is like in schools. We know how draining it is, and we know that on one day you might be really energized because you've had a great day, and so you can go out and do that run, and on another day maybe you need a different source of self-compassion, a type of self-compassion. So regardless of what actions you end up taking, I think the first step is to carve out some regular time to just be with yourself. Whether you like journaling, and you can grab a notepad, and so on those occasions you can physically just write down what you're noticing about yourself, or someone to talk to. Obviously I'm big into coaching, and knowing that talking can really help you to compartmentalize and clarify what's good for you and what actions you can take, or a family friend, or whatever it might be. But finding time, because I think once you can set yourself a boundary of, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes or 10 minutes a day. And if you can say to yourself, I deserve 10 minutes a day. If I can't find 10 minutes a day to sit and be with myself and give myself that time, something's not right. So when you can just start those small steps of setting those boundaries, it's a good practice for you to then go ahead and set boundaries for other things in life, and gradually you'll feel better about being able to have that agency and that sense of control in a small action like taking those 10 minutes, and hopefully that will spread until you gain that sense across a number of aspects of your life.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much for discussing leadership wellbeing tonight. There's been some great recommendations. There's been some great examples and discussions around the values and creating that culture of wellbeing within schools. So thanks to all who were also watching. With that, please share our link. I believe the link will be sent out at some point this evening. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Okay, so just very quickly before we wrap up, if we could use the hashtag #StepUpShares and share your key takeaway from today's event. I know I certainly will be, whether that be on X or Blue Sky, or even LinkedIn, that would be great. Thank you. So where next? Go follow the Eventbrite page if you haven't already. You could also write a blog for us. We are always looking for people to write blogs for our website. Please check out our website, and there is a directory and a library of information on there. Amplify us on X, which used to be Twitter, and LinkedIn, and as mentioned, obviously the Blue Sky. Also subscribe to the newsletter. There's lots of information in there about leadership, and please join us at another event. So the next event/webinar is the membership webinar, which is on the 19th of June, which is next week. And then we also have Thursday, the 3rd of July for our leadership diversity webinar. And just before we go, so as mentioned, please connect with us on X, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky. And just before we go, a big thank you. And I do want to mention it is actually our second birthday today. So we had the event the other night, but today is the actual date of our birthday. So happy birthday to Step Up. Thank you.